So thank you so much, everyone, for coming to our meeting tonight. We're going to be covering neurological disorders and what it's like to live with them with our lovely guest speakers who are volunteering their time to share their experiences with us. So a little bit about Invisible Illness Awareness Network before we get started. We're a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and we raise awareness for different invisible illnesses, chronic illnesses, and disabilities. We also help students start affiliate organizations of us at their respective institutions so they can be leaders and educate their peers, especially those who are interested in different pre-health careers on invisible illnesses overall, to create a more inclusive environment to benefit patients and their families affected by invisible illnesses. So if you know of anyone who's at a college or a high school who's interested in invisible illness or interested in healthcare, we'd love if you send our information to them, and we'd love to work with them to help get something started at their institution. We currently have different affiliates at Loyola University of Chicago, University of Pennsylvania. We're starting one at Rutgers, and we're working with a few other schools right now to get things started at their institutions. So the more the merrier. We're happy to have more people on board to share our mission. So what is the Invisibly Aware series? Well, you're at it right now. We have two meetings each month. The first is a presentation on our various topics for the month. So the month of July, we're covering neurological disorders. The second meeting of each month is our guest speaker meeting, which is tonight. And we have guests talk about their experience living with the conditions that we're talking about, treating them, or caring for someone who has experience with the respective conditions or topics of the month that we deal with. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us tonight, and we look forward to this meeting as much as you guys are. So if you haven't already, if you can follow us on Instagram at invisible_illness_network. We post multiple times a week on different conditions and different awareness days. We also have an Invisibly Aware Series Instagram purely dedicated to these meeting dates and topics. And our guest speaker meetings are always recorded and uploaded to our YouTube channel. We also, on our website, you can find more information about how we got started as an organization, how you can connect with us, and how we can best help you with your journey of learning about different invisible conditions and experiencing them. And our Linktree has a lot of other links like our events calendar and our newsletter sign up, so you can stay up to date with our meetings and topics and don't miss out on any of these great meetings that we have. So a few disclaimers before we get started tonight. None of this is going to be medical advice. So if you're concerned about any of these issues regarding yourself, please talk to your doctor. Also, please note that no two people with the same condition have the same experience with it. And please also note, we're not experts on these topics, but our guest speakers are experts on their personal experiences and their bodies and their conditions. So that's just a few little notes to make before we get started. We also are going to be doing an access check. So I should have started off with a verbal visual description, so my bad on that. We're going to do some verbal visual descriptions of some of our board members and speakers tonight. And yeah, so an example of that is I'm Stephanie. I'm one of the co-presidents and co-founders of Invisible Illness Awareness Network. And I am a white woman with medium length brown hair, and I'm wearing a blue t-shirt. Also, you can turn on captions if you would like in the bottom panel by clicking the CC button. And if there are any other accommodation needs, please message Sarah privately on Zoom to let us know what we can do to best serve your needs. And yeah, any questions we can direct that way too. So if you have any questions throughout this presentation of guest speakers, please put them in the chat whenever you feel like it, or you can wait to the end and raise your hand if you want to ask a question verbally. And if you want to ask a question anonymously, you can message Sarah privately, and she will speak your question from an anonymous standpoint. Yeah, that's it. So before we get started and introduce our guest speakers, we're going to do some quick takeaways from our presentation a couple weeks ago covering epilepsy, multiple sclerosis, and functional neurological disorder, just to have a general idea for those of you who may be unfamiliar with some of these conditions. These are barely scratching the surface of what these conditions are, so it's just a little bit of background. So for epilepsy, the general definition of it is the disruption of normal brain electrical impulses causing different bursts of abnormal signals. And this can impact people by causing seizures, ranging from changes in consciousness to severe convulsion. And it affects approximately 50 million people worldwide. Different treatment options can include medications, surgeries, dietary changes, and devices to help control seizures. And complications can include injury, brain damage, and sudden unexpected death in epilepsy. But please do note that epilepsy is not the only cause of seizures. Some takeaways for multiple sclerosis include that the definition is generally the immune system attacking the protective covering, so the myelin of nerve fibers in the central nervous system. This generally impacts people by causing nerve damage, and this can disrupt communication between the brain and the body. It affects approximately 2.8 million people worldwide, and main symptoms can include numbness, weakness, fatigue, cognitive changes, vision issues, and bowel and bladder dysfunction. Some general treatment options include medication to manage symptoms, to help slow progression, and to modify the immune response. Some complications can include mobility issues, epilepsy, and progression can sometimes cause serious neurological damage. And finally, some takeaways from functional neurological disorder. The general definition is abnormal nervous system function without structural damage being present. So this can impact people by disrupting normal brain signaling, and that can affect sensory input, motor function, awareness, and cognition. It affects approximately 4 to 12 people per 100,000 people. And main symptoms can include numbness, pain, double vision, weakness, paralysis, tremors, seizures, headaches and migraine, and issues with gait, balance, memory, and concentration. Some general treatments include medications for symptoms and physical, occupational, speech, and psychological therapy. So that's a little brief background. And now I'm going to pass it over to Morgan to introduce our guest speakers for tonight.
Hi, everyone. My name is Morgan. A quick access check. I am a white woman with brown hair and a ponytail, and I'm wearing a blue sweater. So thank you again for all of our guest speakers who are attending today and sharing their experiences. I'm just going to introduce them real quickly. So Sydney Ann was unfortunately unable to make it today, but we do have Tiffany Caros. She is the founder of the Epilepsy Network. You can find her at Tiffany Caros on Instagram and on TikTok. We have Alek and Britt, and you can find them at Bruce Epilepsy on Instagram. And then we have Erin Spicer, and you can find her at miss.ebethspicer on TikTok.
Hello.
All right, so if our guest speakers just want to do a brief introduction of themselves, and we can get started. If you could also do a visual check like what we did for Access, that would be great.
Okay. I am a white woman. I'm wearing a green t-shirt and I have short brown hair.
Thank you, Tiffany.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alek. I am a white male, wearing a black hat and an old man sweater. And
I'm Britt, and I'm a white woman with medium brown hair and a black cardigan.
Hello, everybody. I'm Erin, and I'm a white woman with medium blonde hair. I have on a black and gray sweater and glasses.
Awesome.
Wonderful. Thank you guys so much. And we'll go ahead and get started with some of the questions here. So what is your experience living with neurological conditions?
Yeah, and we'll just do kind of a roundtable style. Anyone feel free to pop in and answer, and let's go.
My experience with epilepsy spans over 15 years. It's had its challenges, but it's also driven me to become a strong advocate. Through the Epilepsy Network and my blog, Rise Above Epilepsy, I've focused on raising awareness and supporting others, and it's been extremely rewarding.
Awesome.
my story is very similar to that of Tiffany's, living with epilepsy. It's been extremely challenging. I've lived with it for more than half of my life. But within the last maybe 5 years or so, my wife and I decided to co-found something to kind of reach out and kind of empower more people within the epilepsy community and bring light to epilepsy and seizure disorders as a whole. So
That's wonderful.
I have been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis for 5 years. Don't know exactly how long, but it was many, many, many years before that that I actually had it. And I have just found it very important to be an advocate and to try to bring people together with MS, not just MS, but so that they have somebody else to count on. So I've tried to build a community on TikTok where people can come together and not feel so alone.
That's
awesome.
great that you guys, oh, sorry, Stephanie.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say that's great that you guys have all found this community and are interested in spreading that advocacy and awareness. Definitely a key part here when we talk about these conditions. So if you wouldn't mind sharing, what was it like getting diagnosed with your condition?
Okay, sorry, go ahead, Erin.
No, you go ahead.
No, I jumped in.
For me, I didn't ever suspect MS. It was never a thought in my mind. I didn't even know what it was, to be honest. I just knew something wasn't right. You know, there was all these little symptoms that kept adding up and getting worse as I was getting older. And things that I thought were just a part of me that I'm like, no, something's just not right. So getting diagnosed with MS sometimes can be a long process. You know, I started quick overview here. I started with my normal doctor. Eventually, they sent me to the ENT, and the ENT did some tests and ran an MRI. That's where they found it. Then sent me to the neurologist, who, you know, ran all the tests to rule everything out and confirm that it was in fact MS.
And my situation, I was 16 years old. I didn't know a single thing about seizures or epilepsy. At 16, maybe it sounds harsh to say, but I also didn't care to learn about it because I was just focused on being a teenager. And I had a tonic-clonic seizure in bed. And my brother took me to the hospital the next morning, and after a series of tests with my general practitioner, who then referred me to my neurologist, and performing numerous EEGs, it was then determined that I was suffering from epilepsy. So
There's a similarity there. My first seizure was when I was 16. It was a tonic-clonic seizure while I was in bed. And I was on medication for about 6 months. Then they took me off, and I was seizure-free all the way up until I was 22. And I was only married for 4 months at that time. And I had my second tonic-clonic seizure while I was driving, and I crashed my car. I was fine. But I was officially diagnosed as having epilepsy, and that's how it goes. Once you've had 2 or more unprovoked seizures, you're diagnosed with epilepsy. But of course, you know, I've had the, standard testing done, the CAT scan, MRI, EEG, just to ensure that that was the cause. And I was officially diagnosed as having epilepsy. But a few years later, I was re-diagnosed as having refractory epilepsy because they had a difficult time managing my seizures.
Interesting. Could you go in a little bit about what that means for people who may
Sure.
be unfamiliar with that?
Yeah, because they were, tweaking, trying to test different medications to, stop my seizures. I was having tonic-clonic seizures, complex partial seizures. They were raising the dosage, trying different medications, nothing was working. So, refractory epilepsy is also known as intractable or drug resistant, and that was me. So, that was what was determined as what I had is drug resistant, intractable, or refractory epilepsy.
Got it. Thank you for explaining that.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what was, what is your kind of day-to-day life with these different conditions, and what has your condition changed for you since, if you can remember a time from where you before you had were diagnosed with your condition versus now?
Would anybody like to go first? I don't want to cut anybody off.
Tiffany, lead the way there.
Oh, yeah, sure. So, day to day, I manage my seizures with medication and by keeping a consistent routine. And so my symptoms can include seizures and fatigue. And the thing is so I prioritize rest and avoid my seizure triggers, which can include stress and sleep deprivation. Those are the two biggest ones.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Mine's very, very similar to Tiffany's. It's knowing, well, it was first understanding what my triggers were, and some of them didn't manifest until later in life. So early on, I knew sleep deprivation was a main trigger for me, and then followed by stress. And it wasn't found out until maybe about 8, 9 years ago or so, that alcohol was a main trigger for me as well too. And that led me to kind of slowly drinking less and less, to the point where I've been sober for about 4 years now, just to help with seizure activity. But I also, on a day-to-day life, like my wife and I, we have 3 very young kids at home. So caring for 3 young kids, like 2 of them being 2.5-year-old twins, it's chaotic at the best of times. So doing that while you're on medication, or if you're recovering after a seizure, it can definitely take a toll, not only physically but mentally as well. So
And for us, it's definitely having a good support system around to help with that.
absolutely.
It's a
Oh,
huge-
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
makes total sense.
Mm-hmm.
I would say my day to day is unpredictable.
Mhm.
That's the main thing. Is, sometimes hard to make plans because you want to do it, but you don't know on that day how you're going to feel. So, means obviously triggers such as overexertion or the sun for me, heat intolerance. I know those things are going to wipe me out faster, but there's some days you just don't feel good and there's no, rhyme or reason. So it's definitely unpredictable, but it's about managing. MS is progressive, so to slow down that progression and then manage the symptoms, at
Right.
the end of the day. And as far as day-to-day life before versus after, I say all the time that I'm so glad I was diagnosed, and some people are like, that's crazy. It has been a blessing because now I know what's wrong with me, and I
Yeah.
can, look at these things and try to prevent some of them. I can be proactive about it. And I know my triggers, and, I can work on it. So I feel like getting diagnosed was one of the best things that's ever happened to me. So
Oh, I can agree with you
That's
on
great.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, having a direction to go towards and like a treatment option or treatment options available to pursue is such a big game changer when it comes to things, rather than just having random symptoms, being like, well, what's going on? Like being
Yeah.
diagnosed. How long, I think you guys kind of touched on it, like when you were younger, like, and as you were older, it kind of, for both of you who have epilepsy, you got more information from your doctors and things like that. How long of a time period did it take for you to get initially diagnosed, like from the beginning, for those that haven't shared?
Mine was fortunately, and again, I can only speak for myself. I have heard many different stories, but for myself, I was very fortunate that my turnaround was very quick. After the first seizure and going to the hospital, it was kind of quickly doing MRIs, CAT scans, just to make sure there was nothing else going on, and then lining up with my general practitioner, who actually, fortunately for myself, was also dealing with epilepsy or living with epilepsy. So he kind of knew kind of the stepping stones and what we should do and referral process. So aligning me with a neurologist at the time was very, very quick. I think I was about maybe 2 months into it. And that neurologist was great. Every single appointment, it was get a new EEG done. And
Yeah.
so it was probably about 2 months. And from my first seizure to this is what it is. So, and I again, you hate to say you're fortunate for your diagnosis, but in a way, I was in that situation. I am. So
Yeah. And same here. For me it was pretty quick because of course I had my first seizure at 16. They didn't know why. So, they placed me on medication. They thought it was a one-time thing. And the second time they didn't know why. So it was assumed, of course it's epilepsy, but they wanted to, cross all T's, dot all I's and run those tests. And, the results came back that yes, it was definitely epilepsy, but it took a
mhm.
few years to, you know, confirm that it was refractory because, I was failing every medication that they were putting me on. So, yeah.
Sorry, Erin, were you going to speak there? I think I might have cut you off by
no,
a
it's okay. For me, like I said, it was a long journey from having the symptoms to figuring out that it was MS. But I'm also fortunate that once they found the MS, it was probably about a month and a half to 2 months from where then that they ruled everything else out and confirmed it. So, and that seems a lot quicker than what I hear from some people, unfortunately.
Hmm.
Yeah. Talking about generally like invisible illnesses overall, it can often take years for people to get any inkling of what they
Absolutely.
have. So it
Yeah.
really depends
Yeah.
upon your circumstances, and sometimes we're in the right place at the right time and we see the right physician and the right
Mm.
healthcare providers that are knowledgeable about these things, and people can get help that they need, which is why it's so
Yeah.
important that we want to educate people about these different conditions so that, when they are off, helping people in the future, that they know about them and they know where to direct people for the best help, because getting quick treatment is so vital for quality of life and just in general. So
Yeah, right, right, exactly.
Right. And for people, you know, like us, I lost my train of thought. That's one of my symptoms of MS is I lost
it's
my
okay.
No,
I
that's
had something to
perfectly
say from what
fine.
you were going to say.
Me too. So
I get
It
brain
left
fog
me.
a lot, so.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Alrighty, we'll go ahead and move on to our next question here. So with some of those symptoms that you guys were describing, what treatments have you tried with those symptoms? What has worked? What hasn't worked? Kind of just give us that background there.
Yeah, I know some of you touched on medications and things, but give as many details as you feel comfortable with.
I've been on a gambit of different medications. As I was saying, I have refractory epilepsy, so I've been on just about all different kinds of medications, epilepsy medications that you can think of. I'm sure there's more out there, but um, I've even gone as far as to do the SEEG test. That's a very difficult, word to say. Stereo epilepsy. Yeah, it's difficult to say. But the SEEG test, which is to determine whether or not you are a candidate for brain surgery. And unfortunately, I'm not a candidate for brain surgery. If I had been, I would have done that. But so I was left with the options of being able to do the the VNS or the RNS if I'd like. Uh, I'm not ready to, address those options yet, but they're still on the table. So right now I'm doing medication solely.
Got it.
Tiffany, I feel like you're basically the female version of me when it comes to our stories, because our stories are very intertwined in that. Same sort of diagnosis age, but as well with medications, I've been on basically everything under the umbrella
Mm, mhm.
with medications, and it's often my epileptologist that I see now. He often refers to it as kind of, because I'm on 4 different types of medications currently.
Me
He
too.
always just says, "Yeah, there you go."
Yeah,
So he
yeah.
always just says it's kind of finding the right cocktail. Like it's making sure that
Yes.
the dosage is proper, and finding like a certain medication that will kind of really positively affect the other ones that I might be, or complement each other.
Yeah,
I
right.
haven't found that yet. So we've gone down the road of also doing like another, everyone's heard of, or majority of people have heard of ketogenic diet.
Yeah.
And that was actually something that was founded as a treatment plan for epilepsy initially.
Mm,
Um, so I was on that and doing that for about 2 years,
mm,
and fortunately, I just didn't find any benefits. My seizure activity was staying the same. So it was
right.
kind of, after 2 years, I was just saying, you know what, I think enough is enough. And
Yeah.
as with Tiffany, same thing. I'm not a candidate for brain surgery, but VNS, RNS, we'll see if that is a route that I go down, or that I take down the road. So
It's a big step to take. It's not one to jump into lightly.
exactly.
So, you definitely want to do your homework. You want to think about it. You want to continue to talk with your doctor about it. So, yeah.
Would either of you mind explaining what those options are for people who may be unfamiliar? Yeah, exactly. Denise just asked what is
Oh,
VNS?
well, there we
Yeah.
go.
Sure.
So VNS is the vagus nerve stimulator. So it's basically just because I don't have one and I haven't gone down that road, I haven't done enough homework into it. But I don't know, Tiffany, if you can explain it better than I can, but
I can do my
um,
best.
okay, there,
So
yeah, you take it.
it's a pacemaker that's placed underneath your chest here. And there's wiring that runs underneath your, on your vagus nerve that runs into your, underneath your scalp and to the areas of where your seizures are happening. And when a seizure occurs, it
Mhm,
sends an electric pulse and stops the seizure from happening. And you have a little, handheld remote that you can
mhm.
press as well that can send a, electric shock to stop that seizure.
And then you also mentioned RNS. What would that be? I guess what would be the difference between those two?
RNS is a
That,
little bit more
yeah,
invasive, if I understand correctly.
yes, yeah. Do
Yeah,
you want to tell about that one or?
I couldn't even begin to start with that.
Okay, so that is another type of pacemaker, but that's placed underneath the skull, actually. So that one is also it sends an electric shock when the seizure happens. So it's a little more invasive. It's, you
Hmm,
know, more extensive.
hmm.
Is that something that you also have a remote for? Is it something that kind of automatically kind of
It
controls
actually,
what happens?
yeah, it's actually automatically, it's done automatically, but you have to see your doctor routinely just to get a little tune up, as they say, just to make sure that everything's working correctly.
That makes sense. Thank you for going into the details of that.
Hmm.
Cool.
That's
Then what
why
has
it's
been,
definitely worth thinking about before you jump into it. It's
Yeah, it sounds like a
yes.
big decision.
Mhm.
And it does take it alters the course of your quality of life and everything revolving around epilepsy. So
Mhm.
makes sense.
It's really interesting to hear that technologies like this exist as well. It shows that there's
Yeah,
a lot
Oh,
of
Oh
it's
advancement.
yeah.
But yeah.
Oh
it
yeah.
has it has changed. Like it's the technology that goes into not just epilepsy, but I'm sure for countless other conditions. It's if you look back even 10, 15 years, the amount of medications that we have now that we didn't have
Hmm.
previously, or just equipment or whatever else. It's pretty amazing, and you can only hope that we continue this trend for another 10 or 15 years and develop more procedures that people can take for not just epilepsy, not just neurological conditions, but whatever else is out there. So,
Absolutely. I agree.
yeah, and that's why research is so important at institutions. Like there's a lot of medical schools that have a main focus of having research and just a lot of other institutions. And it's without research, we can't find these treatment options, right? Like there's
Yeah.
so much
mhm,
that goes into it, and there's so much time. It takes so much time to go through the whole research process and to have people undergo studies and see what works and what doesn't. So
yeah,
constant advancements are always happening, and it's even if they're happening behind the scenes, it's like things we want to hope and keep putting research funding towards these things so they can keep updating things and find the easiest, least invasive solutions possible.
yeah.
Right.
The medication that I started on was working for me, but had some side effects. And now, years later, I ended up having to switch for insurance reasons, not for anything medically.
Hmm.
But now they've come out with the newer version of that medication with less side effects. And I'm able to take that, and it is controlling the progression of the disease, at least in my brain. So there's been no new lesions. So that's, wonderful that even just since I've been diagnosed, you can see how much they're doing, especially, I don't know about other disorders, but in MS, like the medication has just grown leaps and bounds. I
That's
said it was
incredible.
a good time to be diagnosed, I guess, if there is such a thing, because they're really coming along with medications.
That's great. I'm so happy to
That's
hear that
awesome.
it's helped you.
Hmm.
Definitely.
Oh yeah.
And what has been some of the most impactful experiences regarding your condition, whether they're good or bad? What has made a difference to you and regarding this?
Well, I'll tell you, I receive messages of people telling me that when I share my story or any of my content, that it really helps them to come out of their shell and feel less alone, um, and feel confident enough to speak up and speak out. And that really helps me to uh, want to do more and, do the best that I can to, you know, create more advocates, if you will. Because I think that's what we need, right? We need more advocates.
Mhm.
Definitely.
Absolutely. When I was diagnosed, like I said, I didn't, when they even said the words, MS to me, I didn't know what that was. And I learned that no one else around me knew what it was either. So I
Yeah.
kind of took it upon myself to, okay, I need to spread some awareness here. That way, when somebody is diagnosed or comes in contact with somebody, in their life, that maybe they'll know something about it. But
Yeah.
then the reward came, like you said, when you start getting those messages about, oh, I'm so glad you posted this. I'm so glad you're here. You don't know, just bringing people together. And the whole thing is not feeling alone. I think that's the big thing. And when
Right.
somebody can say, you've helped me not feel so alone, or, get through this rough day, that
Mhm.
makes me just want to keep going, because if I can take something bad and turn it into something good for others, why not?
That's how I feel. That's what gets me out of bed in the morning and makes me excited. That's my breakfast, if you
Right.
will.
Yeah. Yeah, that was when my wife and I, when we started Graeber's epilepsy, the intent was basically just to tell our story, living with epilepsy and my wife being a primary caregiver for someone with uncontrolled seizures. And we figured with a blog, it was likely going to be just my family or close friends that were going to be reading it. And several years later, it's been we have numerous messages, people reaching out, and we've been partnered with Epilepsy Canada for several years. Um, just doing we do annual events in our area, and we get to actually kind of have conversations in person with families, with patients, with loved ones. And those are the most, for us, it's so gratifying just to actually connect with those people.
Hmm.
And knowing that again, you're you're sort of making a difference, hopefully. And in our situation, we've been really lucky to team up with Epilepsy Canada, and we've been able to raise nearly $50,000 for epilepsy
Wow.
research. So like that right
Incredible.
there was like, we
That's
didn't have
awesome.
these milestones when we began. It just kind of, they were all stepping stones. And it's still like we're amazed when we talk about it all the time, because we're just so thankful for everybody in the community. So
Yeah. Wow.
Wow, that's
Congratulations.
amazing.
Great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's incredible what you've been able to do
thank
with
you.
your platform. And, kind of from all your answers, it sounds like community is just really a huge
It's
part of it
huge.
all.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, the epilepsy
Just
community is just amazing.
just
Like
being able to
family.
connect with people, like you can even, having someone who can empathize with you and understand what you're going through. And then
Mm,
Yeah.
also like in some other like chronic health communities that I'm a part of, like just being able to learn about different treatment options and get other people's perspectives about like certain things and adaptations like to your
yeah,
lifestyle, like that has been
Yeah.
really valuable. And I'm sure that's a big part of it for you guys as well. So
yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's kind of why we're doing what we do here, is like trying to reach more people and bring people together to talk about these things and
Yep.
destigmatize them, because not a lot of people talk about it. And it's great that you guys
Exactly.
share your stories on social media and you reach a
yeah,
community of people. And that's like half the battle, is like knowledge is power, and spreading that knowledge with other people and giving people, the resources that they need to get the help that they need is so, so important.
yeah.
So yeah, and also big thank you to everyone at the meeting currently right now. Thank you for spending your time listening to all of this and educating yourself and uh, sharing experiences with people. It's really important, and we're really grateful that you're here.
and
But
then I guess our next question here we can move on to is what has been your experience in the context of institutional structures in terms of support or lack thereof? So that can be with like education, professional institutions, your personal life, doctors, examples such as that.
I think this question is tricky. And I think it's hard as far as MS goes, being an invisible disease sometimes, or a lot of times. It's hard for people to know, how to support you unless you're verbal about it. And then because you look healthy, sometimes you're not always taken seriously. So,
Wow. Yeah.
I hear that a lot from doctors, not my well, actually I do, but from doctors, they'll say, but you look so healthy. And I'm like, I'm so glad I do. But unfortunately, that's not the way, that it is. So I just think it's hard for people, even like, and I'm a teacher in my work environment, to really understand unless I tell them. So,
Right.
and doctors can be, unless you have to find the right doctors, and they're out there,
Mm.
but they can be dismissive. Very long story short, I had to go to a doctor recently about something not related to MS at all. And in the middle of it, I told him I had MS, and it was as if he didn't believe me. He's like, really? Very question. And I thought, And so that is something, unfortunately, the negative side that sometimes we do have to deal with,
Yeah.
especially when you look healthy, when you're not
Yeah.
in an active, seizure, or I'm not actively doing something that people just assume.
Right. I understand that. And a lot of time, well, not a lot of times, occasionally I will have somebody, ask me if I'm working or why am I not working? And they say to me, well, you look fine.
Look
You look
fine.
like you can,
Mhm.
work a job. And it's like, well, you don't understand. I have complex partial seizures and they happen a lot. Sometimes on a good day, I will have like 5 to 10. On a bad day, I'll have upwards of 10, 20, and upwards. And what
Yeah.
this means is that I will have blank out for about
Yeah.
5 to 10 seconds. And I'm not there, I don't speak, I can't speak, and I'm frozen. And I mean, I can't work like that.
Mhm.
I can't conduct myself at a job like that. And they don't understand that. People don't understand that. So when they tell me, I need to work a job or why am I not working? It's like, you don't understand.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
I think
that's sorry, go ahead.
no, okay. I was just gonna say like, and sometimes people they have good intentions and they feel like it's like a compliment. Oh yeah, like you don't look sick. It's like you're healthy. And it's like, thanks, but like Erin said, like I still do deal with this. It's like you want to also feel validated in that and be seen and have your experiences valued and be like, this is my daily life. I'm glad that I'm fine now and you can see me fine. I
Hmm.
found it's interesting when you go to doctors, it's like sometimes you have really good days and you're like, crap, I wish I didn't have a really good day because I wish they could see me like on one of my bad days.
Right.
Um, and people leave that way. So it's really it's a double-edged sword. There's goods and the good parts
Yeah.
and bad parts. But please go and speak, Alex. Sorry to.
No, like, and it's one of those things, and it's exactly that with invisible illnesses where,
Mm.
like with myself, for example, I suffer from 3 different types of seizures, tonic-clonics, which are usually the types that everyone associates with epilepsy, which is unfortunate because there are so many more types of seizures.
Right.
Yeah.
And the 2 other types that I have are my most frequent ones, but they are very, again, like with Tiffany, like they're invisible. I blank out for a few seconds at a time, and I'm not there. Like it's not me. And when I explain to people about another type that I have, which are myoclonic seizures or myoclonic jerks, however you want to refer to them, it almost looks like a muscle twitch. And mine manifest in my left arm, left leg, and occasionally in my mouth, tongue. But unless you know exactly what to look for, you would likely have no idea that I'm actually suffering them.
Right.
However, they can be quite debilitating. So, like, it's pretty common for me to break dishes around our house if I'm carrying a cup of coffee in my hand, and
Right.
it's things like that that no one see. And referring back to I forget, it was it Stephanie, was it you who mentioned the doctor thing?
Uh,
Like just
oh,
I'm not
like
sure.
going to the
Okay.
doctor and them not knowing
Yes.
because you're not having a good day, or you're having
Yes.
a good day.
So
Yeah.
actually, so someone who's tuning in right now, he's actually going through a multiple day EEG, or ambulatory EEG, and we were talking earlier today, and I mentioned it's one of those things where you don't wish anybody ever to have a seizure, but while you're connected to an EEG, that's when you want to have it. You want you want all of the answers that you can have, and you almost feel like I've gone into EEGs and they've come back completely normal, and you almost feel like a failure, if that makes sense. Like it's almost like I'm not giving my doctors the right information, and then I'll go home and have a seizure as soon as it's like the next day or something. So it's kind of, I guess you mentioned, it's a double-edged sword. It's kind of a tricky spot living with an invisible illness. So
I totally get what you're saying because when I did the SEEG, they took me off of all of my medication and they gave me free reign to do whatever I needed to do to have a seizure. So here I
mhm.
am staying awake all night long, watching strobe light television
Yeah.
shows. I drank coffee with, espresso in it. I stayed in the hospital. Generally, you stay in the hospital for 2 weeks for this test. I was in the hospital for 22 days, I think, and I had 0 seizures. They could
Yeah.
not get me to have a seizure,
Yeah.
and I usually have seizures daily.
Mhm.
It was as if my seizures knew that I was trying to get them to come out.
Mhm.
It was weird. It
And
was so weird.
I'm sure that can feel a little bit invalidating as well because, especially when you're trying to get diagnosed and everything, you don't really know what's wrong. Everyone's just trying to order a bunch of tests to see if they can catch anything. And sure
Yeah.
enough, another test result comes back, you're normal. There's
Yes.
nothing wrong with you. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, in reality, you do have something going on there. It just wasn't the right timing with it all. And so
Yeah.
that can
Before we
definitely.
get too off, I did notice Denise asked a question. She said, "Thanks for sharing. What is that called again? I get these." I think, Alec, you were talking about the different types of seizures that you were
Yep.
getting with that. If you could mention them again, that would be great. I
Sure.
think,
Yep.
correct me if I'm wrong, Denise, but is that what you were trying to ask? Yeah, okay, cool.
Okay. So yeah, they can be referred to numerous different ways. Myoclonic seizures, myoclonic jerks. If you just type in myoclonic seizures, they'll be like, if you Google that, they'll likely list a whole bunch of different terms for them. But they all usually fall under the spectrum of kind of yeah, like a muscle twitch. But it's not the same thing. I actually recently had a conversation with somebody else in the epilepsy community, and kind of trying to explain the difference, because I also suffer from your typical muscle twitches, as we all do.
Hmm.
But it makes you, it's a weird feeling. It almost for myself personally, it almost brings like an instant anxiety.
Hmm.
And I don't know if that's because I uh, unconsciously know that they are myoclonic jerks. And usually when I have an increased myoclonic, if it's maybe a cluster of, because I usually have about 40 to 50 a day. But if I
Hmm.
have maybe 10 in a couple minutes, that's usually a trigger that I need to be in bed or on a couch right now,
Yeah.
because a tonic-clonic is likely imminent. So,
Hmm.
but myoclonic seizure, myoclonic jerk, if you Google either one of those, you'll get a little bit more information about them. So,
Yeah, and there's a lot of different, like Alec mentioned earlier, I think too. There's a lot of different types of seizures that can fall within
nice.
epilepsy too. Like there's a
Yeah.
lot. So if you look up epilepsy, you can see like there's a lot of there. You can find like you can even just Google like types of seizures and things like that, and see if there's any that like fall within like what you're experiencing too.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, back to the question. Does anyone else have anything else to add about uh your experience with institutional structures, so like work, education, doctors, things like that? Or did we kind of wrap up on that?
I remember, did we all answer? I
Okay.
think we did.
Okay,
think
cool.
so.
That's the brain fog going. I don't, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I think we kind of touched on this a little bit before, but what advice would you give to someone who is newly diagnosed or suspected of having your different conditions?
Oh, definitely educate yourself about your condition so that you're aware of your symptoms and you know how to go about um, just taking care of yourself and, you know, what to expect.
Mhm.
Yeah, go with questions, talk to whoever your medical team is, whether it be your family doctor, if you have a neurologist, an epileptologist, ask lots of questions,
Oh, yeah,
advocate for yourself. That is the
there
biggest
it
thing that I
is.
think a lot of people forget to do. No, you could have the absolute best medical team in the world, but none of them will know how you're feeling better than yourself.
Yeah.
So you really need to advocate for yourself and explain what's
Mm,
going on, how you're feeling. And also at the same time, you don't have to be an advocate in the community, although it's super beneficial.
it really
Some
is. Yeah.
people, like it took me years to finally open up about my condition. So you
Mm,
don't have to jump in with 2 feet, but I mean,
no,
if you slowly want to join the community, I mean, we welcome everybody with open arms. So
you took the words out of my mouth.
If I could talk to somebody that was newly diagnosed, the very first thing I would say is to be your own advocate.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's right.
And my neurologist told me that, and I'm thankful. Like he explained that from the get-go, and I took that to heart. And
Yeah.
he's like, nobody's gonna make sure you got your blood work or your refills. Like that's on you. You've got to do your research, or you've got to learn and
Yeah.
advocate for yourself. And I'm stuck to that. And the second thing would definitely be to connect with other people. I,
Mhm.
Mm,
I
yeah.
went probably, I don't know, 3 years, 4 years diagnosed without knowing anyone else. And getting that group together on TikTok was changed my life forever. So connect with people, advocate for yourself and connect with people. And just for MS specifically, I always
Mm,
want to send people to the MS Society because that's a wonderful
mm,
place for help, for
Yep.
research, to keep an eye on clinical trials, new medications.
mm.
They can get you cooling vests if you need them, all kinds of things like that. So that's, and you can learn how to be an advocate through that website also.
That's
Love that.
awesome.
Yeah.
I'm glad resources like that exist to help guide people who are
Mhm.
especially going through those early stages.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm
And
glad it was there.
I know it's kind of like, I don't know, some people are for it, some people are against it, Googling. Um, but my doctor, when I told him that I was Googling my condition, he was like, good. Just make sure that it's a reputable,
Right.
resource. Just do that. Don't look at those oddball websites.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think it's a common thing kind of for people to come in, with all this research they've done with Google and whatnot, and then doctors to be dismissive of it immediately because they're like, oh, you don't have a medical degree, you don't know what you're talking about, that kind of thing. And it's like, I
Yeah.
don't, you're right. But I don't know where to start and I need help. So like
Mhm.
just establishing and being an advocate for yourself, being like, I need your help. This is all that I could come up with. What can you come up with? Like
Yeah.
ask questions that way too. It's like you're supposed to be an expert on, a lot of different things. Please help me, guide me in a direction because this is all that I can come up with and I need more. Um,
Yeah.
so it's like trying to, have that, understanding with doctors too is why we like to try to have doctors come on and be guest speakers too and kind of see the whole
Mhm.
perspective of various people because there's the patient perspective, there's the caregiver perspective, there's a physician and
Yeah.
healthcare professional perspective, and it's
Mm.
like everyone wants to help each other. It's
Hmm.
just how can we do that in the most productive way and how can we actually help each other.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
mhm. So that kind of leads into the next question. If doctors were to know one thing about neurological conditions or your condition specifically, what would you want it to be? Try to keep it to like 1 to 2 sentences. I know we can like rant about this for ages, but
Yeah.
what would you generally want doctors to know about your condition or just neurological conditions?
Well, I would say that it's not just solely about the seizures. It's, it extends more into like the emotional side and the mental health side as well. Doctors don't always see that. They don't see our day-to-day living and how we go about our day.
Yeah, I'll just continue, or I'll just agree with Tiffany there. That's exactly my answer as well too. It's one thing to write a prescription and to go over your tests with you, but I mean, I suffer from anxiety
Mm,
as well on top of my epilepsy, and that's kind of I deal with anxiety because of epilepsy and epilepsy because of anxiety. So like, it's kind of it's a tricky thing. So it's something that you wish your medical team would kind of look into the other repercussions of medicine. So
yeah,
Right.
yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. I mean, exactly that we have to, maybe doctors have to focus more on the individual person
Mhm.
and not just the broad spectrum of the disease.
yeah,
And
Right.
and like you said, the mental effects, the things don't just treat my brain like it, there's so many other things that it affects,
Correct.
and sometimes they don't have time for that, or that's not their priority.
Yeah, when I was first diagnosed, I fell into a deep depression because like you were saying, I didn't know anybody, anybody at all. No friends, no family, no nothing. And I
Mhm.
didn't even know, like you were saying too, Alec, I didn't know anything about seizures or
mhm,
epilepsy. So I was in the complete dark. And a lot changed. I had to stop working and a lot of things needed to be adjusted. And so that was a big change and really fast too. So yeah.
Yeah, I think kind of with what Erin said, I think it's important with the providers for just to keep in mind that, they're not treating just the condition, they're treating the person and
Right.
about who they are and all of these other holistic factors there. So I think that kind of touches on a lot of what you guys were saying there. And
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
think that would be a good perspective for a lot of practitioners to develop.
Oh yeah, and it would be really helpful too, I think, for even, doctors to provide maybe uh an area to where you can get emotional support if you need it, like a therapist if
mhm.
you need it, But of course,
Or a
yeah.
group, like some kind of support group that they could
Yes.
recommend for
Yep.
you.
Yes.
Yeah. And I do understand the other side of that too, of like, they don't want to recommend specific places because then if people, it doesn't work out for them or it doesn't like mesh well, they'll be like, hey, you said to try this and it would help me. And it's like,
Exactly.
ah,
Right.
Yeah,
so it's like you
right.
want to provide as much help as you can, but it's like, it's like just generally kind of even mentioning it as an option maybe because people might not think about, oh, there might be support groups for this. It'd be like, here are some options to kind of explore and some resources to be like, hey, maybe support groups right for you, maybe an individual therapist is good for you, but just make
Right.
sure that mental health aspect is also being taken care of too, because like Alec and you all said, like it kind of goes hand in hand sometimes.
Mhm.
And it's also
Yes.
important to keep in mind, like some mental health conditions are also comorbidities of some of these things too. So
Mhm.
it's not unheard of to have a mental illness and also have an invisible illness that's on the more physical side. So
Right.
it's treating the whole person, treating all of the conditions and things that you have together, rather than
Right.
each thing as its own separate thing because they all intertwine.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if we have time for one more question or if we need to
Yeah, we can
go.
do, we can do one more. This is the
Okay.
final
Yes. So if the public were to know one thing about neurological conditions, what would you want it to be?
For me, I would want them to realize that it affects everything. That, just to realize
Okay.
that just because I have MS and you might associate that with my brain, it might be affecting my legs that day, or, whatever. It could be a million things. So just that that's our control system. And mine doesn't work right. I've got some shorts, so that everything, it affects everything.
Mhm. Yeah.
And
And yeah.
I've heard some people say to maybe explain MS specifically, instead of saying MS, to say that you have brain damage. just because it is, lesions on your brain, to try to get them to take you more seriously. I haven't tried that because that sounds way worse than me just saying MS, but
I think for me, it's knowing that, like, when you do suffer from whatever type of neurological condition, the chances are you're going to have good days and you're going to have bad days. And it's not just, and again, I can only speak on epilepsy, but when I do have my seizures, that's one thing. But there are days when I've talked about like spoon theory in the past, and if people are aware of that one, there are some days where I'm just super proud that it was like, okay, today got out of bed, I showered, did some laundry, and took care
Yeah,
of the kids, and it was like everything else is just kind of out the window. However, the next day I could be just like anybody else. So they vary vastly day to day.
right. And on my end, just because I have this condition, I want to be treated no different. I want to be treated as me, as, I am still me. I just, we're all dealing with something. We're all of us have something we're going through. It may not be an illness. It may be financial. It could be who knows what, but I still want to be treated as a person.
I always say it's a part of me, but it's
Yeah.
not me.
Not,
Yeah.
yes. Yes. Yes.
For sure. That's why we always we end our presentation meetings, and we need to add it into one of the slides for this one too. But be kind to others, because you never know what someone's experiencing just by looking at them. You
I
have
Right.
absolutely
no
love that.
Right.
idea.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
so true.
Mhm. You have
Right.
no idea what's behind closed doors. You have no idea what's in their personal life. It's kind of wild to think about, like, every person that you pass on the street. It's like everyone has their own life with their own things going on, and it's
Mm.
you don't really think about that all the time. And it's just,
Yep.
check yourself, keep in mind that you're not the only person that exists in this world. Like, there's a lot of other people having their own lives and things go on. So,
Hmm.
but yeah. Well, thank you so much to all of you for sharing your experiences and answering all these questions today. We really appreciate it. If you have any final thoughts or things that you want to leave people with, that would be great. If not, we've said a lot tonight. And anyone who has any questions, please field them in the chat or raise your hand, and we'll get to you.
Well, thank you again just so much for having us. We really do appreciate being included in the chat. And a message to anybody who's suffering with an invisible illness of any kind. Just it sounds so much easier said than done, but stay strong
Yeah.
and reach out to your support system. They will help you through some of the hardest days that you've ever gone through. So.
Wonderfully said, Alec. Wonderfully said.
Thank you guys so much for letting me step in last minute. It's been incredible, and I'm really happy to be able to do this. So I appreciate it.
Thank you
And
guys so
thank you
much.
for sharing. I'd like to learn more.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for taking the time out to join us tonight. And we really do appreciate your insights and experiences. And it's not easy talking about these things either. Like, it's personal details and things that you've gone through, and reflecting on those things. But we really do appreciate everything and all your time.
Well, thank you. I'll come back anytime. So
Great. So I see a couple questions in the chat. Allie says, what are some of your best coping strategies? So that could be, like for your specific condition or just in general, and how to deal with day-to-day life, anything.
Well, I know I've said it a couple times in the past, but one of my favorite coping mechanisms is humor. It really just keeps me strong. It keeps me smiling. It keeps me from going down a path of, sadness and depression. So I like
For
finding
me,
funny cat videos and
yeah. For me, it's kind of one, knowing your triggers, and then not only that, but knowing your limits too, and realizing that, like, there are some days that you do have to take a step back and maybe not kind of go overboard, and but Yeah, like for me, it's the exact opposite of comedy. I'm kind of, I'll curl up on a ball and watch some horror movies. So that's kind of, yeah,
Movies are good. Movies
there you
are a
go.
good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, distracting yourself sometimes is always. I would say I definitely throw myself into my work and being a teacher, to try to keep my mind off things sometimes.
Yep.
For sure. And then Denise had a question. She asked if anyone has tried working with functional medicine or alternative methods of healing, like red light therapy, ozone therapy, other preventative types of exercises, things like that. Anything that's not the traditional medical route of things that is found helpful or not.
I guess technically the ketogenic diet is not your traditional route, although it is prescribed to you if you, like it was to me. But I mean, it's simply a change in the your food intake and basically the types of food that you eat. But it's not your traditional medication that you would get from your pharmacy or treatment from your actual doctor. So
Hmm.
I've tried just a little red light therapy for muscle pain. And it did help.
I've not
Just,
heard of that before.
it helps with lots of other things too, like anti-aging and stuff, supposedly. But
Huh.
yeah, it does help. It's just sometimes hard to find the time to go. And I don't have one in my house. So
I'll have to look that up.
Yeah, and sometimes there's things like that's another thing with research too. It's like not everything has been researched yet. We don't know what things can and can't help. So it's like having an open mind and being willing to try some things might, you
absolutely.
know, lead
Yeah.
to better results. We don't know. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why we kind of revolve and have that community too of like personal experiences of like, hey, I tried this thing and it helped me. Maybe it might help you. And that's exactly what
Yep.
just happened here with you bringing it up,
Right.
Erin, and Tiffany being like, hey, I need to look that up now.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
Do a little
Yep.
homework.
There you
yeah,
go.
and yeah, and obviously not everything's gonna help everyone, but it's it's why not give it a try. So
Absolutely.
Oh yeah.
nice. All right. Any other questions anyone has? Feel free to raise your hand or speak up. You can just unmute. Otherwise, we'll wrap up tonight's meeting. Yeah, well, anyone thinks about more questions, just a reminder again, please follow us on Instagram and check out our website for any other resources. We're working on a resource page currently to have links to a bunch of different resources. And, we have a contact page as well. So if you're interested in what we do as an organization, please reach out. We'd love to hear from you. And any feedback that you have for us on our presentations or, suggestions for things we want us to see covered in the future. We have a research team of volunteers and we have a social media team of volunteers. We'd love to, add to our repertoire of things that we're working on. Yeah, you can find about our events calendar and our newsletter signups and get reminders for future meetings because we love hosting things and we love having people come to them. So thank you so much for your time and taking the time out of your day to come to these. And we hope you have a great rest of your week. We do have a couple quick announcements before everyone starts hopping off. But in August, we will be covering Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, so EDS, and the hypermobility spectrum disorders. And we are going to be switching our meeting times to Wednesdays due to popular vote on Instagram. More people can apparently come to Wednesday meetings than any other day of the week. So we will be switching to Wednesdays going forward in August. So we have a meeting on August 7th on the same Zoom link, and we'll be presenting on EDS and HSD. And August 21st at the same time on the Zoom link, we'll have guest speakers talk about their experiences with these conditions. So thank you so much for everyone for coming, and we hope to see you at future meetings. But I hope you have a great rest of your week. And thank you again to all of our guest speakers for taking the time out to share your experiences. We really, really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you very
Thank
much for
you.
having us.
Awesome. Thanks so much, guys.